Okay, welcome everyone. We'll start shortly. We've got a couple more people just coming in at the moment, and then we'll kick off as soon as we can. Okay, I think we've kind of leveled out on the numbers there. So welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be focusing on the realities of adopting AI in mid-tier firms today. And we've got some great speakers, again, sharing their views, experiences and perspectives. So just before we get into the main event, I'd just like to tell everyone a little bit about the project, which kind of underpins the webinar and the work that we've been doing here. So we're funded by the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund for Next Generation Services, particularly focusing on issues around competitiveness and the adoption and diffusion of AI in legal and accounting. So there's three broad aspects to our projects. So the first is the academic insights, looking at trying to understand what's going on in the sectors, what the challenges have been around the diffusion, the adoption of AI, machine learning and advanced technologies. Through a series of case studies from which we've now developed a series of outputs that we're looking increasingly to kind of share and disseminate with firms across the sector. So if you are interested, please do reach out to us. The second aspect of the project, and in a couple of weeks, we'll be having another webinar, which is going to be focused on futures using a scenario planning methodology, trying to encourage and support firms to think slightly broader in terms of their horizons for planning beyond what we know to be the case generally in the sector, and to think about challenges that are coming from outside the sector. So the focus that the project particularly has on mid-tier firms, we recognize that there's often a wait and see game, particularly around technology. And the third aspect of the project, and one again where there's an open invite to people, over the summer, if it weren't for COVID, we'd have been hosting design sprints in and with a number of firms to help them think about the challenge that AI and advanced technologies represent and the opportunities as well. So what can be done within firms to help accelerate the benefits of AI and advanced technologies. So we're not able to do these in person for obvious reasons, but we are now looking to try and host different aspects of this online. And we're working with a number of firms to do that. So very keen to hear from people that might be interested in what we can offer around the design sprints. And again, we are a kind of funded project through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. So there's not any costs associated with this. This is something derived from the work that we're doing, where we're able to roll this out and take this to firms to try and really offer a means of thinking about the challenge that AI and advanced tech represents. So just before we kick on with today, to highlight a couple of our forthcoming webinars in the series. So next week, we're going to be looking at incubators, incubation and nurturing technology in the professions. And we've got a kind of great array of speakers there as well, from Canada, from Austria, and also Laura Collins-Scott, based at Clifford Chance in Singapore. So hopefully this will be of interest. We're looking at how those technologies can be used and how firms serve to support their development. And also the webinars from previous weeks you can find online as well. So we'll share details with that again after today's webinar. Unfortunately, given the nature of the tech, you do have to register webinar by webinar. So again, if you're interested, please don't forget to register and we'll share details of the forthcoming webinars as well afterwards. I just want to highlight as well, so the webinar series today, we've been working in partnership with AI for Services from the Knowledge Transfer Network, and they've highlighted a series of events aimed at looking at the future of grant funding. So if you are in the legal profession, the accountancy sector or the insurance sector, there are a series of events over the coming weeks where we're looking to actually try and explore what opportunities are out there and to try and engage new firms within this challenge. So do feel free to register and follow up with those. And today we're grateful for the support of the UK Legal Tech Association, who have again helped partner with us to extend the network with which we're trying to attract new individuals to participate and learn within the webinar series that we're hosting. So they themselves have some forthcoming webinars on different aspects of practice in law. So thinking about client communication, wills and LPAs during lockdown, and a third one there on cybersecurity review. So if you're interested and you want more information on those, do follow up with us and we'll share some information in the chat as we go through today. So before I hand over to the chair, I just want to thank our speakers. It's great to have them committing their time and contributing and hearing their insights. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Professor James Falconbridge from Lancaster University Management School, who's a co-I and collaborator on the project. So James, thanks very much.
Thanks, Tim, and again, welcome everybody. And we have got a great lineup of speakers today, so thanks for joining us. So each speaker is going to give us around 8 minutes of their personal reflections on the role of technology in mid-tier firms and its adoption. And so we'll run the speakers back to back. Each person will take their 8 minutes in turn. But as we go, do feel free to pose questions or reflections in the chat, and we'll come back to those at the end of the presentations from our 5 speakers. So note your questions, and then we can return to them later. So without further ado, we will push on. Our first speaker is Mark Day, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Law South Group, and Mark will tell us more about that group at the start of his presentation and offer us some reflections from that perspective of a series of firms engaging with the opportunities, but also, of course, the challenges of new technology. So Mark, can I invite you in to give us your thoughts?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Lovely. Okay, thanks, James. Hi, everyone. I'm going to give you some personal views from my wider experience, but also based a bit on what I see in the work that we do for Law South. In my CEO role, I lead and run the services that Law South provide to the 12 member firms, which range from 100 plus to 500 plus user firms. I'm involved in discussing the range of business needs, aspirations and projects that those member firms have. Apart from the board of Law South, which is made up of the managing partners and CEOs of the member firms, we have a range of special interest groups, one of which is information technology. And we also discuss people, skills, learning and development with the HR community and others. This is all supported by a secure networking and collaboration space for the members. In the COVID-19 crisis, I have chaired calls, typically monthly for the board members, but more often than not fortnightly with the IT directors, finance, marketing, HR and L&D and workplace and facilities. Our group risk director chairs a call on risk and compliance, which I also attend. All these special interest groups have had to deal with how their team's operation is affected by the crisis, and they've found it valuable to share with each other. At the start of COVID-19, most of the discussion was about the immediate crisis management, but over time, the discussion has developed and is now more forward-looking as well. In all of these discussions, the openness to where technology can assist and the appetite for automation of functions for end users and clients is a frequent topic. I cannot say that machine learning or AI is a frequent topic, but it comes into the margins of the discussions, for example, where a point solution that is of interest may use such techniques. I think that the pleasant surprise that many mid-tier firms had when successfully moving to home working with very little drama, although some of the IT teams may not agree, has led to this success becoming a bit overblown. There's a lot of airtime and tech space that we've all seen talking about how different law firms will be, but use of Zoom or Teams for video conferencing and using e-signatures does not a transformation make. One interesting learning point from the shift to home working has been to highlight to many firms how much paper was still part of everyday processes, such as those run by finance functions. Now, the challenge is to convert the initial workarounds into effective permanent processes, making full use of appropriate technology. In relation to adoption of data and AI in mid-tier law firms, one of the background issues is a lack of awareness of what else is out there. The lawyers are generally seen as the key users, and most lawyers in mid-tier law firms have only really ever experienced the traditional law firm technology stack. Apart from Outlook, Microsoft Office, and document productivity tools, users in mid-tier law firms normally only have experience of their practice, document, and matter management solutions, CRM if they have one, but by some distance, not all do. Their one technology team is still required to deliver operational IT and business as usual. There is little spare time for true innovation. The incidence of the whole of the main network support and the help desk being outsourced to managed service providers is on the increase, but is by no means widespread. The biggest projects are still for accounting, document and matter management systems, usually delivered with little or no external resource, i.e. alongside the business as usual by the same people. I think more firms need to free their technology people from the tyranny of the operational IT focus to focus more on how they can use technology to deliver a better service to clients and improve their business. They do some of this, but it is way down the list. Recently, the IT directors of about half of our members quickly compared notes on a developer resource they had, which ranged all the way from 0 to 1. Partly because of this, these individuals were quite generalist and doing bits of a number of things. That's not an extensive in-house deep technical resource for experimentation. If mid-tier law firms really want to look more at a more strategic approach to digital work and intelligent automation, I believe that they need to explore the bigger picture. Even before COVID, we had provided our members with thought leadership and executive awareness on high-level topics such as artificial intelligence and intelligent automation, and introductions to point solutions that can enable people to understand clients better and provide a better service. Touching on some of the other general factors, I recognise the need to have a better understanding of data. I applaud the initiatives such as Engine B and the general trend towards open source and collaboration in this area. Some of our firms have worked with external suppliers on data analysis and reporting for management information. Those same suppliers help us as a group by providing data analysis know-how for members via our secure collaboration space. My understanding, and this is from working with GDPR consultants, is that most businesses did not take the recommended initial action to do a data audit to identify exactly what data they had, where, duplication, etc., let alone any sort of architecture strategy studies or approach to data destruction. Completing the preparedness to be fully compliant with GDPR could be part of a justification for law firms spending a bit understanding their data better. In some discussions with Oxford Brookes University around data, this led to a related point. Mid-tier law firms struggle to have access to someone in-house with an understanding of data science and data structures. There aren't that many people around with these skills, and the firms don't necessarily need a full-time person, even if they could recruit them. Having said that, there are some very capable people in mid-tier IT, and given the right conditions, such as time, budget, and commitment to a strategy by the business, I'm sure they're capable of doing more. They will probably need to work with appropriate external organisation as well, and this is something that Law South is seeking to help with. Another quick comment might be that there is a tendency to talk about cost rather than investment and return on investment. Of course, big projects will have a business case, but lots of promising ideas can be strangled at birth. And I think that is true that there's been more interest in technology since COVID-19 hit. And this is now just as much in reaction to the need to look for ways to save cost and be more productive and efficient, as much as it is to adopt new ways of working. Much of the conversation is about what the people in the law firm may or may not want, and less about what clients will now expect, either anecdotally or based on solid research. Structured client listening is arguably still at too low a level in legal, which is something we have been exploring with member firms, both at our last year's conference when it was okay for 75 people to be in one room, and in webinars since. I shall draw to a close at this point and hand back to James, but I'm happy to join the panel Q&A that follows.
Thank you, Mark. Really interesting observations there, and I think your point about looking towards the future more, and as our eyes kind of come up off the desk from the immediate, and thinking about how to secure transformations that may be in progress but may not have fully happened yet, are really kind of timely and important observations. So thank you for that contribution. So we'll move on to our second speaker now, who's Kareem Derrick, who's the Product and Innovation Director at Kennedy's. Kareem spent a lot of his career in the technology sector, and will tell us more about his kind of move into legal, and particularly I think we'll talk about the kind of client perspective on the role of technology and the opportunities it might bring. So Kareem, I invite you to offer your thoughts.
Thank you for that, and good afternoon to you all. So yes, My background is not in legal or in insurance. It's actually in technology companies, where I've been working for some time. I suppose it's significant in the context of the discussion this afternoon that that Kennedy's was brave enough to take that step. It's not something that I've seen across the sector. So my background's been in development, in managing development, managing products, actually managing businesses in their entirety, raising venture capital, all that sort of stuff. Mostly in the education space, but you know, austerity took its toll. I was looking for a new challenge. I popped my head up and I discovered law. And so I found myself at Kennedy's. And of course, what I didn't know then and what I know now is that Kennedy's has an insurance focus. And I guess, you know, thinking now about the challenge of a general practice, that would have been quite daunting. But I had a narrower set of problems to kind of focus on. And the business had already embarked on a client-focused trajectory at this point. It created, in the garage, if you like, a number of client-focused applications where it had validated the proposition around these products. I don't think the business would have recognized at that point that it had been following a lean methodology or even knew particularly what Agile was, but you know, they were iterating around products and reality. That's what it was. And these products are designed to be used in place of lawyers. You know, a lot of what we see in the sector is inward looking at margin and efficiency. I think, again, Kennedy's has been a bit different in giving me a laser focus on client value. So to the degree that the business alongside the products created this notion of a core principle that we help our clients use lawyers less through the technology. You know, and this is counterintuitive. It looks, you know, it looks like you're cannibalizing your business. And my job was really to take the work that had already been done, to scale it, to turn it into a business, really, to generate revenue, to continue the trajectory, and to surface new products and ideas to take the firm deep into the future. So, you know, how do we do that? What do we do? Well, firstly, we built development capacity. So Mark just spoke a little bit about that. We did it organically. I've been burnt, I guess, too many times in the past by over-enthusiastic VC money with inflated expectations. At Kennedy's, we mostly bootstrap the investment in the technologies, and I think that's important. You have to take the partnership with you. The core proposition, as I've said, looks on the face of it to be catalyzing the core business. But you know, in practice, we were able to demonstrate that everywhere that we deployed the technology would, in the end, lead to an increase in instruction. But still, it's a brave step to take, and having the buy-in from the senior leadership team at Kennedy's has been instrumental, I think, to the success of the initiatives that the business has taken on. I mean, the flip side of it as well is that actually part of what I needed to do was to create some confidence around the proposition and around the products. You know, lawyers are naturally cautious in nature, and it does take a leap of faith to put technology product out there, which of course is what we were doing. So, you know, a lot of what I was doing was really bigging people up. I was genuinely impressed. It wasn't hard, and I was quickly able to show traction and positive feedback. Valuing what you're doing in a space is another difficult thing to do, kind of counterintuitive, I think, from a legal perspective. A lot of what we were doing originally was given away, kind of an add-on to the legal services, and what we've come to understand, or what, you know, we've helped everybody understand, really, is the value of what we have and the journey that we're on, and that we can draw, and we should draw revenue from it. And in doing so, you enter into a virtuous circle because the client values it too, and so you iterate. What else? Well, building academic relationships has been really important. I mean, I'd spent a long time in education previously. I knew the value of combining the academic world with commercial world. You know, academia, not so great without you know, real life data to draw on. Commercial world, not so great at longer term R&D. And what we're about is augmenting clients with legal expertise through the technology. That's really how I like to think about AI. This alliance of academia, legal, and technology has enabled that. Talk about data science capacity. Again, it's really important. Again, taking lessons from my previous business. It's really important to hire exceptional people and to do so for the long term. And when you do that in this space, you're competing with, you know, the likes of Google and Facebook, who, if you're not too careful, take the cream of what's out there. And so, you know, you need a compelling reason to get these people in. And this is where narrative, I think, is important. Building excitement around it. I think, you know, again, genuinely believe legal insurance, that one of the most exciting spaces in AI right now. Really sense this is where the next generation of value is going to come in the world economy, and you know, there's so much scope for disruption. It feels like we're really scratching at the surface at the moment. And what I'm really interested in the work, really, you know, the best work that we're doing at the moment is looking to generalize our approach and some of our solutions. A lot of what we see in AI, I think, it's quite narrow in scope. There's lots of energy and training in very specific areas, and we talk about due diligence and contract review. You know, what I want to do is to kind of go beyond consideration of stuff like text extraction as AI, and really look for where we can deliver value around the augmented intelligence that I spoke about. So we're always looking for volume problems to solve, where we can apply the combination of legal expertise and technology to really grab low-hanging fruit. Really looking for where Pareto applies, where we can achieve 80% of the value for 20% of the effort. And that usually, experience seems to suggest, is where our lawyers are actually less likely to be instructed as well, but where they could add value, but perhaps are too expensive to do so. And this is where, again, you end up with this, you know, these synergies. So last part really as well, you know, grant funding, research programs, they've been a key part of the journey as well. It's something that I'd worked with Innovate UK quite a lot previously, and other research programs. And I guess, you know, what they do in any sector is just provide a framework for bringing consortia together. And, you know, I find it really important to include your clients in those consortia, but academia, as we've spoken about, and other expertise, bringing it together around a table where, you know, the expectation can be much broader than perhaps a project would ordinarily be. And you know, R&D doesn't necessarily have to have a successful outcome, and you know, there's the expectation of pivots and twists and turns along the way. And just being part of that project and being able to educate the business around how these things work has also been, you know, really beneficial, I think, for you know, taking the business with us and exploring the potential for our clients. I will stop there. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you, Kareem, and some really interesting observations there about your experiences, and I think one that stands out for me is your point about new products and the need to get over the fear of kind of cannibalizing the business because and recognize the kind of new products and opportunities that might emerge. That very much tallies with what we've been looking at in our research and findings. So it's really interesting to hear your take on that perspective. So thank you. So we'll move on to our third contributor. Our third contributor is Harry Alif, who is an enterprise and account director at Capita Workplace Technologies. So Harry's going to talk about both kind of the technologies and that may be kind of relevance and important as part of these kind of changes, but also about the kind of organizational issues that go with that. So Harry, can I invite you in to give your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you very much, James. So yeah, as James has mentioned, really wanted to provide some insight really around some of the organisations we're engaging with and specifically relevant to technology. So I think it's fair to say that a lot of legal organisations are clearly working at the moment in ways that they never really thought possible. The use of tools like Teams, we're of course using Zoom, is becoming really the norm for a lot of organisations, but that's really just the start. And I think organisations will have to really embrace technology to enable them to really empower their staff and ensure users can perform as effectively as possible in the current environment. I think it's fair to say that legal organisations have for some time been on a journey to drive digitisation initiatives and move away from paper, which is extremely challenging. And I think more so now, those projects will have to start accelerating to adapt to the climate we face. We know that one of the bigger challenges within legal is that there is typically a significant generational and technological gap across the workforce, which means organisations are hindered because they have to try and cater for all parties, but also accepting that culture has a significant part to play in embracing these change methodologies and the success of any of these pending projects. I think it's fair to say that we know the industry still heavily relies on hard copy information flowing into their business and flowing out of their business, and really it's a mold that we believe has to be broken, and a deep dive analytical review and upstream review of the origins of that document, because the reality is for it to have become paper, it will have started in a digital format. So I think that's just a brief summary. I think in terms of looking at the scenario we have now, where there are clearly large numbers of workers remote, and really trying to get the best out of their experience in the way they interact with organisational systems, we know that I think a lot of legal organisations have been quite surprised about the results and the performance they've had from their staff embracing these new working practices. I think there's a transition at the moment where organisations are trying to bring their staff back to the office in a phased capacity. We've spoken to a number of them who are clearly now polling, surveying staff and understanding what that appetite is. I think at the moment the view is really that people prefer being remote. The numbers that are being bounded are sort of 60%, 70% of the workforce saying right now isn't really the time. But clearly, as time moves on, there will be a blend. There are clearly people that sit in a camp that says, actually, I really enjoy remote working. It works for me. I don't really want to return. I think on the flip side of that, there are people that say, remote working absolutely doesn't work. I need to get back to the office, and inevitably there'll be a blend of that. So I think we've been looking and discussing with these companies around some of the tools and the technologies that they can look to that will assist them while they're in this state of flux. So things that organizations are thinking of at the moment is that they've got lots of users that are sat remotely. How those users maybe need to print a document. How do they do that? So whether they're looking at something like print as a service and sending it to an external company, or whether they're using simple ticketing tools that enable them to build up a job and then submit that through to their centralized print room. Increasingly, organizations are looking at how they can cater for those workers that might want to come back to the office a day or two at a time, and provide them tools that help them with things like desk booking. That goes as far as them providing things like contact tracing in the event that an individual came into the office and was diagnosed. And then the classic hard copy position is you have large amounts of inbound post coming into your business. Is typically something that would be physically distributed. So I think a number of organizations are looking at ways they can create a digital work stream and then distribute that information out to those users who are clearly remote. In terms of then the returning to the office, the return to work, it is quite clear that that's being done in a very, very phased capacity. There are clearly people that are shielding at the moment. Interestingly, I had a conversation with one of our legal clients yesterday. There were around 700 staff in the UK. The office opened on Monday, and they had 19 staff appear in the office. So I think there's still very much a journey in that respect. I think in terms of then some of that agility, we know that organisations don't think they'll ever really get back to the same levels of building capacity that they had pre-COVID. That clearly provides an opportunity for organisations to really question the status quo and the working environment that they had. And Mark, I think, really touched upon this, that the critical point at the moment is that there is a journey for a number of these organisations, and that's a drive to digitisation. But I think before they get there, it's really undertaking a deep dive analytical review of their organisation, understanding how information is flowing through their business, understanding what those key processes are that are driving into business applications, whether that be a document management system or into your PRM or into a finance package, there are options available that will enable you to finesse, refine, and automate a number of those processes. So I suppose just to round up for me, I think having spoken to a number of organisations, they accept that there is absolutely a need at the moment to review those historical, manual, and paper-intensive processes, and technology really is going to be the driver to enable them to achieve some of these results, and that's going to be driving to digitisation and automation of those document processes to empower the users both in the office and remotely. And we're clearly on a journey with a number of legal organisations to get them there, and it's not something that unfortunately will happen overnight. So that's it from me, James.
Great, thank you, Harry. And I like your kind of can be the catchphrase, can't it? That Teams is just the start. The move to using Microsoft Teams should not be seen as the big transition here. And I think your point also about the kind of different perspectives on this within firms, generational gaps, different groups of kind of professionals within the firm is another important one. There isn't a single story here. So thank you. And I think there's some nice links there also to our next speaker, who's Sean Ashton from TLT, who's the client service and transformation partner, and it is going to this kind of theme that seems to be recurring about kind of the past and the future is going to talk more to that, I think, and think about and tell us a little bit about the kind of view from TLT and what's happened in the past, but also where things might be heading in light of the last 3 months, but also the longer term journey. So Sean, can I invite you in?
Absolutely. I'm just going to share my screen with everyone, partly so you don't have to look at the bright walls behind me. I'm not clever enough to work out how the system works, so I can have the clever little things behind. So I'm the client service transformation partner at TLT, and it's a new role that was brought in October last year that I helped design, which is basically looking at how we deliver services to clients, how we can deliver those differently, and it's primarily looking at how we use people, processes, and technology at its most basic. Before that, I was a litigator for 16 years, so I've been in private practice for all of that time. In fact, I've been at the same firm for all that time, so I've seen how we've developed over time. So what I was going to talk about is just looking at TLT's focus on this, because I think that's probably a sort of useful insight into how we have adopted AI at a mid-tier firm. And I think it's fair to say that adoption of AI is almost still the goal of the vast majority. In the reality, it's mainly focused on just getting some technology in front of your lawyers, in front of the lawyers, because actually that in itself, and I think that's sort of what Harry's talking about as well, is the digitization of business, of law firms as a business, is the baby step that we need to take before we even need to go as far as and lots and lots of AI within our businesses. And I think we have to be sort of kind to ourselves and not too critical that we haven't done huge leaps forward, even if COVID has been rather handy for people like me in sort of innovation teams, where suddenly you have the urgency given that allows you to sort of encourage people to change throughout the business. So I'll just sort of quickly talk about sort of the backstory and what we have done as a firm. Now, I think our main focus in terms of what we've done with technology and AI is mainly around our projects and outsourcing expertise, because that seemed to be the thing that was sort of driving us forward in terms of adoption. And we've been doing it for sort of 20 odd years, and we've been doing it in a very kind of manual way, in the same that everyone else has. But over time, we were seeing that you could sort of use technology, even if it was very basic, to sort of enhance areas. We could make things more efficient, we could help with processes, we could drive things down to the most efficient level of resource to really drive cost savings for clients. But I think it's still fair to say that in terms of actual technology adoption, it's still taken some time, even at a firm where we like to think of ourselves as being quite forward thinking and sort of always looking for ways that we can do things better. And the first time we really started to properly incorporate the sort of legal tech side of technology outside of that kind of Microsoft stack element was looking at e-discovery around 7 or 8 years ago, where we started to bring on e-discovery platforms for disclosure. But even then, even despite the success of that and the sort of efficiencies that that drove, and the fact that despite the sort of massively expanding world of electronic disclosure, that you could do things quickly and efficiently and cost effectively for your clients, we were still seeing that we weren't sort of embracing other technologies. And it probably, one of the key reasons for that, I think, is because everyone was doing it alongside their day job. As a lawyer, we were interested in this. So you'd have little niches within the firm where you had people who were particularly interested in technology and how it could assist them, how it could sort of get rid of the drudgery of some of the admin tasks, how it could make things more efficient, how it could really push in. Sorry, I've been joined by a small child as on cue. So you could really sort of push through that efficiency, but that was all in little niches across the firm. And so what we really found is a desire to sort of push that further by looking at bringing it together. So we set up a centralized team, not quite as sophisticated, I think, as what Kennedy's have done, but a sort of centralized team where those people who had that interest really came together and were able to drive it from that central location. And we didn't just limit that to lawyers who had that interest. We opened that out to technologists. We brought people in. We've got project managers, legal project managers, and also, and this goes back to Mark's point, we've involved our IT team as well. So our systems architect is part of that team to make sure that we are embracing it across the firm and also benefiting from that knowledge that those teams have. One of the other things that we've really done is focus on client need. And so when we were talking to clients about what technology they were actually after, we were seeing that they wanted things that didn't seem to be available in the marketplace. So we actually partnered with LegalSifter about 2 years ago now, because one of the things that clients were struggling with was, how do you deal with the negotiation of contracts when those contracts are BAU contracts, that it's not worthwhile involving lawyers because we're just too expensive as a private practice firm to justify that expense. And so what was happening is that they'd sort of just cobble it together and sort of hope for the best without really engaging either their own in-house team or external lawyers. And so we identified LegalSifter as a product in the States, which wasn't over here, and partnered with them so that we could bring it to the UK and introduce it to clients and indeed new clients to the firm through that product. Where we are now, and this is just sort of some of the solutions that we're developing at the moment, we're really centered around, it's still focused on that client-centric development of products. So we're talking to our clients to work out what they want. And in reality, it's mostly very simple and doesn't require a great deal of technology. But what we find is that the technology that we can use is instrumental in making these effective. So if I look at sort of commercial consulting, TLT digital regulatory affairs, they are really simple ideas about looking outside of legal services, but into that sort of near legal space. So you're doing things like TLT commercial consulting is effectively allowing our clients to build procurement functions, and we would consult and help them with that. And we use non-lawyers to build that, and we utilize technology for the clients, and we use the expertise that we are building internally to put the right technology in place for them. TLT Applied is just an expansion of our outsourcing and projects expertise that we've built up over 20 years, but we're now making sure that we've got the right systems and processes in place so it's consistent, it's a sort of productized thing that we can sell to clients, but also that we have the right technology in place so that we're using things like automation, even at its most basic, just allowing us to automate documents, but also in using systems like AI-driven automation to build out complex documents so that we can really sort of enhance those elements for the clients. And then we've sort of come up with our TLT1 product, which is at its most basic a contract lifecycle management product, but it's actually the incorporation of lots of different pieces of technology in one place to allow clients to either self-serve, which of course goes back to what Karen was saying about clients wanting to self-serve more, and also allowing them to give the work to us if that's what they want. And it will take contracts from the commencement, the drafting, the templating, all of which use elements of technology and in parts AI, through the creation and the negotiation using Legal Sifter, and also the extraction and analytics of information within those contracts and the storage of that information so that clients can actively manage their contracts. This has been the single most common thing that we've found that clients are talking about, is that even when they have got their contracts sorted, and even if they've used templates, and even if they've used little bits of technology like DocuSign that of course everyone's using now, once the contract's signed, it just goes into the vast pit of contracts somewhere in the business and no one looks at it again. And so you have this lack of knowledge and lack of data management that's going on and really needs to be captured. And that's sort of that's what we're working on at the moment. So very quickly, because I think I'm probably very rapidly running out of time, what's next? And I think really the future is not about big steps in AI for the vast majority of our clients. There are some big players who they want that, and they, you know, if you're talking to the financial services clients and things like that, they are very much ahead of the game. But the vast majority of clients just need simple things, and that might come down to process automation. They want flexible offerings. They want to make sure they've got value for money. So actually, what law firms need to be doing in the technology space is being much more reactive to their client needs, and making sure that you put in place, that you use that technology internally so that you understand it and you find the best products for your clients by using it yourself, and that you put those products in place when the client actually needs it, and don't force the agenda just because you found something that looked really cool and sexy, which was this sort of the latest piece of AI. And I think I'll hand back now because I suspect I'm very close to time.
Thank you, Sian. That was great. And I really like the kind of, you use the kind of analogy of baby steps there, and celebrating baby steps and recognizing this is a journey. And I think you provided us with a really nice kind of snapshot of the journey that you've been on at TLT, and how those baby steps are important. And I think that reflects the wider contributions today around thinking about what's happened in the last 3 months and the kind of steps that have been taken, but then asking where does that lead us next. So I think that's something we can come back and reflect on it in the discussion later. So thank you. So we'll move to our fifth speaker. Before we do so, if I can just remind you, the chat is open. We've got a couple of questions in there already, but if you have questions or reflections on what's being said, then do post them in the chat so we can come to them in the open session shortly. Our final speaker is Katrina Wolfenden, who's a partner and innovation manager at Waitmans. And I think Katrina is going to turn our attention in particular to thinking about the people and the professionals, and how you capture their enthusiasm and their commitment to the kinds of change that we know go along with introducing new technologies. So Sian, can I welcome you and open the floor for your contribution?
Hi, thank you very much. So yes, I mean, we've heard a lot today, haven't we, about how tech can increase efficiencies and help with client engagement. I think from our point of view, though, it's really important that we don't just get obsessed with whatever the latest kind of shiny piece of tech is, and that we recognise that people need to be able to work whatever tech and innovation systems that we make or buy, and that the tech actually needs to be either trained by people or used by people, and they need to be able to identify future opportunities as well. So a lot of our work is about kind of upskilling and a cultural piece, a kind of hearts and minds battle. And again, going back to what Sian has said, most of this is done by actually solving a real problem, whether that be for our clients directly or using our own internal colleagues as that testing ground before we go out to clients as well. So a lot of my work at Waitmans is involved in that kind of the cultural and the change piece as much as anything else. I speak as a lawyer, so I can generalise. We are usually pretty rubbish at technology. We've got colleagues who struggle with Excel and think that is nothing short of wizardry. So a lot of the new kind of techs and tools that we're looking to get people to use, and for them just appear very alien, and we're asking them to think it in kind of really different ways. So part of it is being able to bring people with you on that kind of X Factor journey, and to show them, I suppose, in almost a safe kind of way that the tech is actually there to help them. So we hear a lot of stories in the press, don't we, like of the robot lawyers and people being concerned that it's kind of coming for their jobs. But for us, it's all been about kind of telling our colleagues how, quite frankly, that the tech can help with some of the boring bits of the job. So kind of data collection and things that nobody spent years at kind of law school trying to perfect the skills to then come and do, and it allows them really to free up their time. So it enables them to concentrate on those really hard cases, those test cases for clients, and where they can be adding real value for the client. So just a couple of examples then really of how we've tried to do that within Wakeman's. We started off initially by developing our own chatbot. And again, I mean, this was, you know, pretty simple technology, but the use case for this was a really important one because there was a lot of frustration. We've got kind of helplines for, you know, finance and HR systems and those kind of things. But actually people don't want to have to send an email or phone somebody and be put on hold. They actually, for a lot of the kind of routine queries, the who does, how do I find, where is, they want that immediate response. They're usually midway through doing something. And the chatbot then was the idea of being able to service that need really. And again, give that people that immediate access to the technology that actually caught on massively. And, you know, we keep adding new skills and new functionality to it. And that also serves as our kind of innovation ideas repository as well. So a really useful way of trying to, I suppose, coax people into a more innovation mindset. Another problem that we looked to solve internally as well, so another kind of bugbear for our fee earners was saving emails onto our case management system. And again, was more difficult than it needed to be and took a lot more time than it needed to be. So each individual email had to be saved onto our case management system. So we worked with some external providers. We had a successful pilot and we've used some RPA to save these emails automatically straight into our filing case management system, just flagging up anything where the system isn't sure of. And again, time savings on that, you know, 20-30 seconds per email, obviously scaled up through an organisation, are really significant. So those kind of almost immediate quick wins, the actual helping our own people with some problems and showing them that the kind of the path to innovation wasn't scary, has then really helped, I suppose, adopting kind of some more client type problems, and again getting champions as well. So once you've got people on that journey and kind of keen to buy into it, then it's been much easier to kind of introduce other technology as well. And again, I suppose there's lots available for kind of those mid-tier firms as well. So things like Kira for document review, and getting early adopters and champions for this has been really beneficial in kind of getting that to then snowball and for our lawyers to suggest other use cases. And I suppose one of the opportunities that tech and that kind of thing presents to us in particular. So historically, there were some pieces of work that we just physically didn't have the people resources to be able to do. And we had one not long ago where a client needed 1,800 documents reviewing in a week, and we physically couldn't pull enough people onto it. But using systems like Kira enabled us to do that, firstly at the right price, and secondly within the time scale. And again, with a really high level of accuracy that the kind of client paid testament to. And again, from that, then people who've been involved in that as a project are now coming and suggesting all kinds of use cases and ideas that they wish to develop. And again, you know, to some earlier points as well, innovation has provided many opportunities to collaborate, be that with other firms, with tech companies and with academia. And it does provide opportunities, I suppose, for other streams of funding that may not have historically been available. So we've also got a live project with Frontier Labs that's been funded by Innovate UK, and that's part of the industrial strategy. So I've got an academic background, so I'm quite used to kind of these funding calls, but I think it's fair to say that it's been a little bit more of a learning curve for our lawyers. And they are really, really competitive. So I suppose the top tip for them is to go for them, but to put your all in. Don't be, I suppose, lulled into a false sense of security that a 400 word limit actually makes the process easy. In fact, it doesn't. It makes it really hard. You have to really be able to distill down your idea and your concepts, and obviously actually writing something that's quite short can take more time. And again, you know, they're scored by a panel. You can put the same idea in, or applications can appear widely different scores and stuff. And I suppose the main thing from a law firm's perspective is this isn't something that you can take to your partnership and go, do you know what, in 2 months we're going to have funding and we're going to be away. You know, it's a slow burn of a process. You've got to pick projects that you can afford to wait a bit of time on. But if you can do that, then they can be really valuable ways of being able to kind of kickstart some projects that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do. You know, and we're always happy to chat to people about our experiences of applying and getting the funding as well. And then just to conclude, really, I suppose, back to the people side. So there are real opportunities for law firms to be able to kind of differentiate themselves and to be able to upskill or even indeed reskill people with many kind of tech related roles. So My role as innovation manager is a new one to Wakeman's a couple of years ago, and that's enabled us to build kind of whole new teams around me. So we've got innovation project managers, legal engineers, training seats in innovation, data scientists and product managers that are all kind of doing work that allows us to better serve our clients. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Katrina. That's great. And I particularly like your observation, which I think reflects a few of the comments today around not being captured by the kind of shiny piece of kit, but putting as much attention, if not more, on kind of capturing the enthusiasm of the professionals and thinking what's actually going to make it work for your firm. I think it's a really important point, and again reflects some of what we've been looking at in our research. So thank you to all of our speakers. Some really useful insights there. For the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to bring our 5 speakers back in again, both around the questions that have been posed on the chat, but also to kind of draw out some of the broader observations, I think, that have come from the contributions. So we'll turn to the chat to start with, but I want to look at the specifics of the questions, but also kind of broaden out I think they're pointing to some bigger issues that have come up across the talk. So the first question comes from Edward Walker. And it's a specific question for Karim, but I think it raises a broader issue about organizational forms and structures within firms and how you handle that when dealing with technology. So I'll invite Karim in a minute to perhaps say a few words about the specifics of Kennedy, but then some of our other speakers to come in as well. For example, Sean mentioned the establishment of her group and how that was an important step. But I think all of the speakers in different ways have alluded to this about, you know, the question of the organization of this within firms, a really important issue. So Karim, can I invite you in first for a few specific reflections on the question that's been posed, but then any of our other speakers that would like to offer some observations too.
Sure. So hopefully you can hear me again. So yeah, it's a good question, and perhaps should have been mentioned in my talk. Kennedy's have set up a separate entity. It's only recent, just before lockdown, really, that we got to that stage where we have housed the technology product function that I spoke about in a completely separate entity, in a limited company. And there's a number of motivating factors in that respect. Partnership is the best model, in my view, for professional services. And I think, you know, the market demonstrates that. You know, and I like working with the partnership. I think, you know, it works very well in that context. In technology companies, not so much. You know, if you think about examples where tech has been successful in a partnership context, you know, it's difficult to think of any. So what a limited company enables us to do? Well, partly it's to do with organization and agility. You know, we're separate from the from our larger regulated parent company. It is a parent company, by the way. Well, it's still wholly owned by the NLP, but it enables that flexibility and agility that the NLP might not otherwise have. It's also partly about how our clients contract with us. I mean, it suited the model early on to allow the technology work to hang off the back of panel membership and legal services contract, but increasingly that, you know, the two had value in their own rights, and actually for new clients they may perhaps only wanted a contract in respect to the technology in the first instance, and so creating a separate entity has enabled that. Everything I've talked about really in terms of what we've done in the business has been about creating the flexibility to see us into the future, because the one thing I know about the future is that I don't know anything about the future. So, you know, it's really about putting as much structure in place that will enable us to respond to the market as it develops, to our client demands as they evolve, and the market in general as well.
Great. Thank you, Karim. Do any of our other speakers want to kind of reflect on that point around kind of what the organizational form that's required or that can facilitate these changes?
I'm happy to chip in. We've chosen for now not to set up a separate entity, although it has been considered. I think that's partly because we're not being driven by the tech in the same way. And I think what Karim says is absolutely right, that if you're going to actually start developing real tech-based products, and you start, particularly if you're starting from scratch and sort of building those up, you almost need the flexibility and the agility of being a startup. We're focused more on bringing in the right technology, and if that means partnering with organizations, then great, rather than us being the actual technology providers. But we've definitely found that unless you give people a role, and that is their full-time role, that they are moved away from whatever else they were meant to be doing within the business, either you bring them in specifically or you move people within the business, that no one has sufficient time to dedicate to this. Clients are the sort of core of all law firms, and clients will always take precedence. So you will always be distracted by client work when it comes in, no matter how important your innovation or technology or whatever else initiatives are that they're there, because clients, law firms will always need you to just chip back into the day job. I found I've been doing the role I've probably been doing for 5 years, but never as successfully as since October when I took it on full time. I've made so much more progress. It's made a big difference. And now we've got a full team that does that. And we are now moving significantly quicker than we were before.
Great, thank you, Sean. And if we just turn to the second question that was raised in the chat, and it was directly to you, Sean, but again, I think I think there's broader relevance here, and Harry may want to come in on this, and I think Katrina was alluding to some of this in her comments about kind of collaborations, about working with technology companies and engaging with them, bringing in, identifying the products, bringing them in. There's lots that could be said there, but maybe, Sean, if you just want to offer some brief thoughts, and then we might turn to Harry or Katrina if they want to chip in some more.
Fundamentally, we're looking at client needs. So we're always looking at the technology that's going to actually fix the client's problem, rather than going to technology companies and going, well, we like this piece of kit, I'm sure we can sell it on. That's the fundamental point. But also in terms of why we partnered with LegalSift, it was because it wasn't available here. So we'd identified a gap in the market. We went and found a solution that would work here. That doesn't mean to say that we're not also working with market leaders over here, because some of the products, Katrina mentioned Kira, we've also got Kira, and it works well. There's other providers, but I wouldn't be we've tried some of the smaller firms, the smaller sort of startup options in that space, and it's not as good. So we're going to stick with the bigger versions because they know what they're doing. So I think it requires a lot of flexibility.
Okay, great, thank you. Do any of our other speakers want to kind of reflect on that part?
Yeah, I mean,
Katrina?
I suppose we're pretty much the same really as Sean. We look to solve the problem first and then see what those that can do that. So we've got a partnership with Audit Comply, kind of a risk enterprise piece of software that we use internally and solve problems for us, and that we can now kind of look to externalize. Again, I suppose even in a law firm scenario, using and collaborating with external companies brings a whole kind of supplier management and all that kind of GDPR angle to it as well. So it's not without difficulty as well.
Thank you. So take this seriously is the message, and think carefully. Any other panelists want to offer any? Harry?
Yeah, go on. So I suppose just for me, I think I absolutely wanted to sort of mirror some of the other sentiments, but I think the key thing when you're sort of embarking on one of these projects is that it has to be done in a partnership approach. I think if you're looking at, if it's coming at it from a client supplier mentality, then I think the real opportunities aren't going to be crystallized. So I think it's starting at the basics. I know Mark touched on this. It's really getting, for me, it's really getting under the skin of the organization, and really understanding some of those nuances, the intricacies. What are those processes that they have? Are they intensive? And really building up a true understanding of what the current position looks like. And I think we talked about low-hanging fruit. So really, I mean, what we would tend to do as an example is we'd look at, do a deep dive analysis, understand all of those pinch points, and it's really about needs, not wants, and then defining them typically based on complexity versus cost benefit, and then attacking it in that respect. But then you're looking at a program of change that might go on from 12 to 36 months as an example. So I think it's get the basics right, grassroots, have an analytical understanding at the front end, and that will shape what your strategy should be.
Yeah, great, thank you. We are scheduled to run for an hour till past, so I'm going to wrap us up shortly. There are a couple of other questions in the chat that encourage you all to have a look at and think about, and obviously if you want to direct those to particular speakers, those people who've posed those questions, then feel free to do that outside of the webinar. So just to wrap us up, first of all, to thank all the speakers. Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit here briefly, representing a network kind of with a view from multiple firms and thinking about where we're currently at and what the future might be. If based on the discussions we've heard in the last hour or so, what do you think might be the main concern, the main consideration moving forward as we continue in this COVID world, but tackle this challenge about the longer term change? Are you willing to offer us a final brief reflection, putting you on the spot?
No, I'm happy to run us to the challenge. Yeah, I think the key point, and it's been touched on by a lot of people, is that organisations that are serious about this need to create the space and give the support to individuals to have dedicated time to tackle some of these issues, and incentivise others in the firm to get involved with that. And I think that there's a big thing around knowledge and awareness, and a lot of individuals within firms at the moment are at a low level awareness around some of these technology issues. So there is a general education program needed, I believe.
Great, thank you, and thank you again to all of our speakers. Lots of food for thought there, and so hopefully that will take that away and give us some ideas for how we move forward, both as academics doing research on this topic, but also at the coalface, those people actually dealing with this in the firms today and for every day in the future, I'm sure. So thank you for joining us today. Do remember there are future webinars. If you go to our project website, nextgenpsf.co.uk, you can register for the future webinars. So I hope you're able to join us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.